Hello, my name is India. I use she, they pronouns, and I make videos about books and sometimes knitting now. But today I want to share with you my attempt to curate a TBR for myself that is not gonna stress me out. So I've always had a difficult time describing what I read to people, especially recently. I started working in a bookstore, so all my coworkers were like, oh, what kind of stuff do you read? What genre? And yes, I do fall into the literary fiction camp of reading. I occasionally branch out, usually to my own delight. I always want to be reading more widely genre-wise, but I've realized my favorite kind of books are slow, contemplative, usually about grief or loneliness, and are really thoughtful and heavy and tender, which is fantastic. Again, those are my favorite kinds of books. I like books that are just a little bit melancholic, with dashes of hope. But that's not necessarily what I want or need to be reading at this point in my life. So I've gone through my TBR, the books that I own that I haven't read, some of which I have read, but the books that I own, most of which fall into this slow, contemplative, about loneliness, about grief, about sadness with the world. And I found some books that I think might break from that norm, might be fun to read, might be comforting, might be a riot of a time. And I'm going to share those with you, and hopefully these are books that I can turn to in the next couple months until I'm ready to get back to my sad stuff. And hopefully these will just, make me feel at ease in some books. So I have a couple loose categories. I have classics, and then I have genres I don't typically read from, and I have other. More typically me, and then also an addendum of maybe this is what I should be reading. I don't know. We're gonna start with classics. I have a theory that classics will get me through this rut because I find them comforting. I find them a nice balance of escapism and relevancy. Yes, I'm reading from a text that was produced in a different time period, but it's still the characters feel like they ring true to the world and the time that I'm living in. So let's talk about some classics. I know nothing about most of these books, so hopefully I will not blabber about things that I don't know about. But the first book I have is The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. I spent plenty of time Googling cozy books, books that'll make you feel comforted, books that are a warm, soft hug. And this came up a lot, especially on oh, here are some classics that are like that. And this is, I quote, a recipe for happiness. That's what I want. I'm excited about this, and I have no idea what it's about. 4 women, 1 medieval Italian castle, plenty of wisteria and solitude as needed. It sounds like some ladies on an Italian vacation in a castle. Yeah, a comedy of absolutely flawless mirth. That is what I would like. I'm gonna bring you closer. Another book that unsurprisingly comes up on all of those like cozy, comforting lists is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is my copy. I read it, I think, in high school. Or like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I read this my junior or senior year. And here's my brief little story about Jane Austen.
I was convinced I didn't like reading Jane Austen. I started with Sense and Sensibility my sophomore year, and I was like, I don't get it. And then I read Pride and Prejudice, and I'm like, I still don't get it. And then I kept reading Jane Austen, and I was like, oh, I think I'm getting this. And the more books of hers that I would read, the more that I would come to enjoy her stories, and the more that I would appreciate them, and the more comforting they felt. Mansfield Park is fantastic. I think that was the last book of hers that I read. It was her last full novel. So I've read all of her full novels, ending with Mansfield Park. And I had a really good time, and so I've known that I need to go back and reread, especially these two books, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility. I recently watched the adaptation of Persuasion and feel like I need to reread Persuasion just for Jane Austen, just for her. This really was the turning point for me. I read this and I was like, maybe I've been wrong about this writer, this author.
But yes, I have a strong feeling that as soon as I'm done reading the Overstory, which is what I'm reading right now, and it's slowly trying to, I don't know what it's slowly trying to do, but slow, contemplative about grief and the world ending. Pride and Prejudice is probably going to be my next physical read. I'm also wearing a Pride and Prejudice t-shirt. It says, "My courage only rises with every attempt to intimidate me." Yeah, I think I need back in this world. I also realized all of my editions of Austen's works are in different editions. A book I'm sure will delight me. I started reading the first chapter in like a little try a chapter tag that I didn't end up completing, is Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons, and this is a piece of satire about books written in like the 1920s and 1930s about this like woman whose parents die, and she's like, what am I gonna do? I guess I'm gonna go lean on the assistance of my family. And it was so funny. Like the first chapter that I read, I'm like, this is hilarious. I've read, and like I feel like I've read enough classics to appreciate what's being done with it. So I think that this is gonna be delightful. I am probably a fake Willa Cather fan because I don't really remember My Antonia, but I do want to read all of her books, so maybe, I don't think My Antonia is the tone I'm looking for at the moment, though again, I don't really remember it. But I have 3 of Willa Cather's other books. I have Lucy Gayheart, which is about Lucy, who goes to Chicago to study music. She is beautiful and impressionable and ardent, and these qualities attract the attention of Clement Sebastian, an aging but charismatic singer who exercises all the tragic, sinister fascination of a man who has renounced life only to turn back to seize it one last time. This might be sad. It said doomed love affair, but I don't know. Then there's A Lost Lady, which is about this like aristocrat in this family or in this town and a man who loves her. It says it's a nuance of, a masterpiece of nuance and revelation. Yeah. And then My Mortal Enemy is about a woman who's like, I'm not gonna marry this rich guy because he's rich, I'm gonna marry for love, and about whether or not that goes well for her. Cool. Other authors that I might read from again. We have North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I don't know if this fits. I don't know if this is going to be comforting. I think I will enjoy this. But I know that this is like social political commentary about like the industrial age, I think. Also about sexual passion and communal strife. I've heard fantastic things about North and South. Whether this deserves to sit with these books in this like curated TBR, I'm not sure. Please let me know if you're like, no, that is an angsty, sad book. Don't read it. Just tell me. I have a Persephone classic. This is Flush, a biography by Virginia Woolf. I love Virginia Woolf, but slow, contemplative, sad stuff happens. This is a biography of a dog. So, I don't know. Maybe it'll be different. Hopefully. Then I have Middlemarch. I don't think reading a really large book is quite what I have in mind, but if this could delight me, I'm down. I don't know what Middlemarch is about, I just know that it's very big. Then a modern classic, which I also don't know anything about. This could be like a slow, sad, contemplative loneliness book, in which case, again, let me know. Just, help me out. But this is Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson. Another book I want to read. I also have Gilead Birth by her, but yeah. Oh, the story of Ruth and her younger sister Lucille, who grow up under the care of their competent grandmother, then their two bumbling great aunts, and then finally Sylvie, the eccentric and remote sister of their dead mother. Maybe. I've said this multiple times, this is true of both of these books. This size of book, this size of hardcover is elite, in my opinion. Okay, those are the classics. Here we are. Next, we have more classics, but under a specific genre of classic erotic fiction. I have said this a couple times before, I'm really interested in classic erotic fiction. I took a class on it in college, and it was one of the most interesting classes. So I have Delta of Venus by Anais Nin. I have Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence. And I have Dangerous Liaisons by, I don't know how to pronounce this French person's name, Chauderlos de Laclos? Maybe erotic fiction is like antiquarian erotic fiction is where I should go. Potentially like some more semi-contemporary, like modern, maybe feminist stuff could be better, but I don't know. Who am I to judge myself? We're gonna do my, I don't know what kind of genre stack, and then my I don't typically read from these genres stack. So, a book I recently picked up at a thrift store is Wild Beauty by Anna Marie McLemore. I've wanted to read from this author for a very long time, and this is the first book of theirs that like really hooked me, or that came onto my radar, and I was like, oh, I definitely want to read this. I think this could be sad-ish. It's like about this family that has magical powers, but if they fall in love too deeply, their lovers vanish, so that could be sad. I have high hopes for this. I have two nonfiction books. I have Leap by Terry Tempest Williams. This is about the Garden of Earthly Delights and is kind of like a creative nonfiction exploration of that painting, which is one of my favorite paintings. It's why I almost got a degree in art history, because I was like, this is so cool. Like, someone was painting this in the 13th century. What? So it's about that. And then we have The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. I think it'll be delightful. I think it'll be good. I think it deserves its spot on this collection. now for the books in genres I don't typically read from. We have what would this be called? We have a crime novel, The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. I really liked The Price of Salt, or Carol, by Patricia Highsmith, and I'm not going to reread that because it's sad. And this is a chilling literary hall of mirrors. I'm curious with this stack of books about books that might be dark and like unsettling, but like are distinct from sad contemplative loneliness. So I'm like, maybe crime and solving murder mysteries. I then have some fantasy. This is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I just picked up the audiobook for A Starless Sea because a friend of a friend lent me that book, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get to that book, but I'll listen to it, so I need to give it back to them. It's a whole thing. But I think The Night Circus is like, I have no reasoning to believe that this will be great for me, like that this will be a balm for my emotional well-being, but I feel like it might be. Like, we've got a circus, it's magical, it disappears, there's stuff that happens, there's dangerous consequences. Yeah, also if it's like fast-paced, again, with my slow contemplative, how many times can I say that? With my slower books, sometimes I just need something that's like quick, that's like got me going, that is all consuming, as opposed to being like all consuming in like a very like stretched out way. Then I have Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson and The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is fantasy about boats? No. This is fantasy. I have wanted to read Robin Hobb for a really long time. I saw this edition and was entranced by it. And I think that this is a place where I can start with her series. I think I might need to do some digging in terms of like, right, where does this stand in terms of like the books that she's written? And then Mistborn is another fantasy that I don't know that much about, but feel like might just whisk me away into another world. Also got Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This is one of my good friend's favorite books, and I don't know what it's about, but I like Neil Gaiman's writings. I am a little bit hesitant. All the Neil Gaiman books, all of them, I've read 2, that I've read have had a little bit of like a melancholic tinge. So if this leans more melancholy, let me know. I will save it for another day, another read. Then, I talked about this in my most recent book video, which was a haul. I picked up the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, which is horror? Yeah, horror and suspense. And this, I'm like, whisk me away. Be scary, maybe, but fun. Like, scary fun, maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to branch out. Those are the books that I'm thinking I need to be pulling from for the foreseeable future. If any of these are slightly melancholic, or like more melancholic than not, let me know. If any, you know, if I've misidentified these books and they're actually very slow and contemplative, also let me know. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you another time.